Welcome back, everybody, to another Growth Support conversation. My name is Neil, and today I'm joined with Conor Pendergrast to talk about going through the state of your CX, auditing it, and giving you an action list for what you can do. Conor, before we jump into it and dive in, can you give yourself an intro and let people know who you are?
Hi, Neil. Hello, everybody. I'm in your ears, and it's a pleasure to be there. My name is Conor Pendergrast from customersuccess.cx. I have, I'm just trying to do the maths, about 20 years, I guess, of experience at this point, working in a variety of roles, almost all of them customer-facing, some of them internal, some of them external, and mostly on the technology and customer support and customer success side of things. So generally speaking, I like to help people help people.
I love it. I mean, we're going into Q4. Well, we're here now. We're in
Yeah.
the later part of the year, and typically, I think for a lot of people, that is the push and plan phase where they're doing the last big pushes for the year of all the things that they were trying to do, and also start planning for the next year.
hmm
And one of the things that I myself am constantly doing as well is kind of assessing the state of where we're at and what are really the things and areas that we do need to focus on for that next period. Over your 20 plus years experience going through it, I'm sure you've done this great many a times. Is
Mm,
there a time when you yourself felt kind of stuck or you didn't know where to start with this process, and where did you end up starting?
that's a great question. I would say that I apply this kind of. I'm very keen on lists, as you may may have noticed. Poor Neil, dear listener, poor Neil has been subjected to my note taking and listening in preparation for this episode, where I definitely have a bit of a writing out loud to do my thinking kind of thing. So I do a lot of this kind of preparation work where there is a simple thing. Actually, on a totally different topic, a friend of mine who is a neighbor of mine and a fellow runner, fellow athlete, and we were literally just before we started recording talking about our plans for next year for the races that we want to do. So it's very much like, oh, it's October. It's feeling nippy outside. Nippy is British for cold, and I've got a nice warm coffee, and now it's time to think about what next year might bring. So I think I do this sort of reflective period most Q4s, and it just depends on what I'm focusing on. A lot of the time, it's like narrowed down to a particular part of my role. So maybe I'm mostly thinking about customer retention or customer growth and how to support revenue growth from customers that way. But then it can go to like, well, what do I want the family life to look like by the end of next year? As Neil and I were talking before we started recording here, about how those can change, and those have seasons as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that you can think ahead in work and outside of the work context, and it's just useful to take a little bit of time, not a huge amount of time, just 20 or so minutes, to give yourself an idea of where things are today, and then from that, what do you want to change and where do you want to go from?
I You subjected me to your list taking. I love it. I tell people all the time I have what I like to call whiteboard brain. So
hmm
I every single time somebody asks me a question, I'm like, "We'll whiteboard it. Let's visualize it. Let's go. Let's talk about it. Let's work through it. Let's do it." Also obsessed with lists in that sense. And yeah, I found that also doing a very big reflection at the beginning portion of this, kind of going into the next steps, just doing a brain dump of everything, and really what's working and what's not. In your list taking notes, I see you have a very clear structure of the way that you found a rhythm or things to really start working with and checking it out. At a higher level, what are some of the things that you really start to look for when you do this reflection exercise?
Yeah. Absolutely. So just to save anyone from having to like speed type out anything, you can find all of these if you go to customersuccess.cx/2025. That's 2025. Then you can get the full list of what we're talking about here. Because if I was listening, I'd probably be frantically trying to take notes. So don't worry about that. But like so I'd say there's six things to. There's five things, but I'm going to add in a sixth thing just for fun as well. So the five things I'd suggest looking at when you're thinking about your customer support, your customer success, your customer experience, depending on the nomenclature that you use around it, but generally how you interact with customers. The five things I'd suggest thinking it through are operations, self-service and proactive, people needs, working across teams and business needs. And then the bonus one as well, we'll talk about in a moment. That's number 6. So for operations is basically like, okay, is everything running effectively? And what are the key areas to check in on? And like, how do you know that everything's running correctly there as well? Let's get into those in more detail in a second after I give the brief overview, I think. But then the self-service and proactive. So we're thinking self-service being, of course, your help center, your documentation, and maybe you have some sort of AI chatbot as well. And then proactive being your, let's say, outbound messaging if you're using sort of email sequence or in-app sequence, depending on who owns that within your company. And proactive could also be something like webinars that you're doing, customer education webinars. People needs then is, as a people manager, Neil, you probably think about this quite a bit. How's your new hire onboarding? Is the team in a good standing? Are people doing all right? How's your culture? Is it feeling healthy? Is it feeling productive? Is it feeling supportive? And what's employee turnover like? And is there anything that you could link back to from a morale perspective or anything like that? So that, I think that's a pretty juicy topic to get into as well. Working across teams, I mentioned, as the 4th topic. Who are your biggest internal allies? Like within the company, who is really looking to improve that customer experience and that user experience from a support perspective, or from their own perspective as well. And then where are the weaknesses in the relationships with other teams? So are there particular teams that maybe you or other people are clashing heads with, and how can you build those into being allies in the future as well? And then the 5th one that I said was business needs. Are you solving organizational needs and organizational challenges, and are you connecting it up? So connecting it up to the actual strategy of the company. It's not just support in a little silo doing its own thing just for funsies because we like doing it. It is to meet that greater business need as well. I'm going to introduce the bonus one if that's all right as well.
Go for it.
Cool. The bonus one that I will say is, what can you stop doing? So just find the things that are not working for now and stop doing them. Or maybe in 12 months, the landscape will look different. What can you stop doing as a result of that? Or thinking about again, going back to business needs, what are the things that are just not going to make sense to support in 12 months? What are the parts of the product that you don't anticipate doing any updates to? Where can you stop putting a lot of time into? So I would say as well, just to save people a little bit of heartache, is like, instead of introducing just new things to do, stop doing something, just find it and stop it.
The good old start, stop, continue. What are we going to stop doing? What are
Precisely
we going to
that.
start doing? And what are the things we need to keep running and make sure they're going well?
Exactly. Do you want to talk about, should we dive into the details of these?
Let's do it. I think it's there's a really great high level. So really talking about, are things running smooth? Are you helping customers ahead of time to maybe start preventing some of those things, and that workload on your team, making sure the team themselves is doing well, connecting with other cross-functional partners to be able to solve those business problems and needs that are much larger, and then slowing down on some of those things so you can spend the time where it's most valuable.
Exactly.
Which one you want to dive into first?
I'm just going to make it easy on people, and let's just start in that same order. So the operational one was the first one. This is your what stuff is happening on the day to day. So probably from a time perspective, people are doing a lot of this at the moment. So the first question being like, what are your actual support channels? Is it a web form, maybe in your help center or out of your help center, a contact us page, email, chat, help site? Although that, I guess, help site would technically fall over self-service, so just forget I said that. Social, maybe you're doing some social customer support. So if for some reason anyone is still on Twitter, excuse me, X, if you're providing support there, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, maybe you have a strategy that you need to tweak there. And then are there any channels that you want to add there? An important question, once again, going back to stop doing something, are there any that you can retire? Like maybe you have supported people through a channel in the past, and you no longer need to do that because it's been really waning. Sometimes it's easier to just narrow down those channels to fewer channels. So Neil, thinking about you, to AIHR, what are your channels at the moment?
Yeah, so I mean, thinking about our
Turning the
channels, right?
tables on you now. Here's the questions.
Who's the guest now? I really look at, so our primary channels are email and chats. So we do have chats, which is a smaller segmented channel than our email. So primarily, we do everything through email. I think we're pretty luxury position in that sense, where the demand hasn't been huge for a specific channel or not. And so what I do is really what we start to look at is when it comes to operations, a lot more of where's the team actually spending their time, and are they really bogged down by really busy tasks, so like a lot more administrative things or not. And we really start to try and solve some of those problems first, and really looking at those opportunities for automation, and really looking at how can we take some of those things off their plate, by smoothing out the process, whether that is through, yeah, again, automation, clearing some of those things out, finding a better way to do something, and really organizing ourselves in a better way. So for us, most of it comes down to that type of frictionful work where it's really, why am I having a person click this button when it could be the system and things like that? Um, just because our operations comes from, we're still scaling, we're still building, we're building our own platform right now. So there are a lot of moving parts. So just making sure that all those moving parts are kind of continuous and are running in tandem together.
Mm.
So in that sense, that's mostly where we're looking at. We look at the landscape in terms of time spent.
Yeah, I think that's a great framing for it as well. It's not only based on like proportion of ticket volume or proportion of cost conversation volume. It is that added factor of the complexity and time taken. Like, to go back to your question, why have one of your team members press a button when that could happen automatically? Or even better, like, why have the customer need to press a button at all? Like, there's so many different ways to solve that. Some of them obviously will require interactions with your product teams, which is why we'll get to working across teams later and why that's important. But if you can also demonstrate that it's, going back to point 5, solving business needs and linking up with the overall strategy, then that can be a really great way of demonstrating the value of improving those channels. Thinking about channels, though, thinking about the ways that you're interacting with customers, the questions that you could also ask are, what are your response times? So how long is it taking for people to actually get help there? Are you happy with those, or are you hearing complaints about slow replies? Like, maybe you're personally dissatisfied with replying to, I don't know, an email within 6 hours, but no one has ever said that they're unhappy about waiting 6 hours. And so that might be a sign that things are okay for now. You know, you don't necessarily always have to get a 2-minute response time on an email. That can put people off a little bit sometimes, probably not too much, but the added cost of doing that would probably be significant. It's something that I know that you have experience with. Are you still working through a shared email inbox? If I'm right, that one of your early projects at AIHR, was it, or somewhere
Yep.
else, was moving away from a shared email inbox? Do you like?
uh,
It works to a certain extent. I think we changed it just before I joined Expensify. So this is when it was still a pretty small company, definitely small team. But share a single email inbox, not even the like front front the products, the shared
yeah,
inbox.
yeah, yeah.
That's like a proper shared inbox, how shared inboxes you could be at a great product. But this is just like help at whatever.com, and then everyone signs in with the same one.
Oh my, like back in 2019 when I first started, we were using Gmail. Like it wasn't even
Hmm.
any sort of ticketing system or anything. And
Hmm.
getting any data out of that at all in any sort of the way was pretty much impossible. I will say we have a proper shared inbox now. Not everybody using their same login or anything. Like
Yep.
it is a proper tool. And I think one of those questions around operations is how do you actually manage that flow and manage that
Yeah.
queue? Because in a shared inbox, it can always be messy, in
Yeah.
a sense of like making sure that there are certain areas that don't get stacked up. Or you have views that can work for you. Is anything slipping through the cracks, in that sense? So one of the things that I like to look at is, yeah, okay, is it actually getting responded to well? Like what you mentioned, do
Yeah.
people actually expect to have a faster response time and that availability or not? Because sometimes that really good metric that you mentioned, maybe that's good enough for your customers. They don't expect more than that. And maybe you just hold yourself to a really extreme standard. You always want it to be faster, faster, faster. In that sense, like I could see it for chats, if that's a really high demand for you. For
Yeah.
email, you need to understand what that response time looks like
I
for
I
them.
agree. I agree with that in particular. Like if you're looking to see which ones you should you should improve, chat is probably going to be the better place to improve in terms of that. Like how long does it take between a customer sending a message and someone starting to interact with it? Like that should be the lowest time possible for chat, because personally I just find it infuriating to have to wait a long time within the, I mean, sometimes it's all right if you have one of those like intercom style persistent conversations. That's all right. Like I know that that'll get handled, but that takes context cues and my understanding of all of this based on decades of working here to for me to know that that is what I should expect, and I'm not just being abandoned. So yeah, I agree that you can have different expectations across your different channels as well. Yeah, cool.
I love one thing that you mentioned though, because you jumped a couple of times from like, yeah, we're talking about operations, but you need
Yeah.
that other one, step number 3, like the business needs, and you need to
Yep.
work cross-functionally for this. Because a lot of some of these operational aspects that you're trying to fix will take a long time, and you
Yes.
do need cross-functional partners to be able to
Mhm.
fix them. It's not like you can say, okay, I reflected, we need to improve this queue management model. We're gonna do it this week, and it's done next week. It's gonna
Yeah,
be great. Change management can take some time,
it
and
can.
it
It
also
can.
takes those other steps. So it's not necessarily even a list, like a checklist. It's more of these things in kind of a spool where you do need them to work together to be able to do this effectively, this kind of planning process,
Yep.
rather than just, hey, it's this one, then it's this one, then it's this one. They're not separate. They're a kind of a clump together because each one will affect another in some sort of way.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So one thinking about operations again and thinking about one way of scaling up, which is what people use to a lot of the time to add a little bit more flexibility for themselves, is working with external vendors. So one of your operations questions may be, do you work with external vendor support for support? Those outsourced companies, there are lots of great ones out there, and it seems like we're getting more and more high quality outsourcing teams now, which is really great to see. It's not simply a way for people to cost cut. It's a way of adding extra value instead, and flexibility to free up a lot of the time our internal team members as well. And then the questions around that are like, okay, well, how do you know the quality of their work is up to scratch? What are you doing from a measurement perspective so that you have KPIs that are realistic and also don't have those sort of negative side effects as well? Like you have to have a range. From my perspective, you have to have a range of metrics, which means that they all work together to give you a good set of incentives, really, for people to behave, rather than just having like, oh, we only do it based on the number of chats you sent or the number of messages you sent. Like all you're doing is
A,
incentivizing a
if
crazy type of behavior there.
if my one goal is first response time in like a
Hmm.
millisecond, I'm just gonna say hi and walk away.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
You're going
a
to say
single
hi on
metric
that
in the
chat, and
game.
then you're going to go say hi on the next chat, and then you've got a bunch of different ones, and no one's actually getting responses. So you have to have those balanced measurements and balanced metrics. That's for all teams, in fact, not just external vendors, but it always feels the most stark when it's an external vendor. Um, uh, if you are running support for a larger organization, you may think about having an extra vendor as well as a backup, just to have as redundancy, or as a challenger model as well. So there are definitely some of those outsourcing vendors who are used to coming into those sort of challenger environments where they're there to provide an alternative and provide another view on how you can work. But I mentioned quality a little bit there, but like, how does that work for your team? So do you have ways of measuring and promoting quality? How's it going at the moment?
Yeah, good. I mean, for us, so we're quite a small team. So we
Hmm.
just added on. We'll have 3 support specialists and one coming back from maternity leave in December. So in that sense, we are still quite small. So having like an official, really robust quality program hasn't been a direct need yet in that sense. So we're taking a more qualitative approach to that feedback, really going through and doing a consistent review process. And we're making sure that that's aligned with the teams in terms of voice and tone, quality, and the expectation around what good looks like, and just really making sure that we can set people up for success to have the conversation types that we want. So we look at that balanced scorecard and really kind of take a look at some metrics in that sense, but more so around the qualitative aspects, voice and tone, style. Is the process that you're following correct? Is it up to date? Is it in line in that way? So really for us, it's really consistency right now. As we grow and as we start to grow those teams, a more robust process will definitely be needed. So maybe that's a good question for people who are listening maybe to ask is, do you actually need as much process as you have, or do you need more?
Yeah, exactly. Are you doing too much? Are you doing not enough? Like, are you, if you're not, again, a lot of it comes down to, it is funny. It's one of these things where like you kind of know when there's a problem. And if you're thinking about this and being like, oh, I do sort of get the sense that people complain about not being able to follow the instructions, for example, or you get social media posts and they're like, what was this reply? This is full of typos, or it's got an old screenshot or anything like that. There could be hints in there that you need to spend a little bit more time thinking about quality of interactions as well. And there are a bunch of different ways. Like, it feels like there are more and more ways to get a good gauge of quality as well through large language models and using tools that integrate, excuse me, into your help product. You can start to get a better idea. So it's not just like, oh well, I'll go and look at 5 conversations every week and then hopefully get an idea of someone's overall interactions. You can do a much bigger sample instead, which is great. And then use those to coach people and to hopefully improve the quality overall.
Yeah.
I maybe shifting gears a little bit, but one thing that I think we experienced at Expensify, not in a negative way. One thing that we got quite robust on over time was how we interact with other teams and how we notify people when there are problems, or how we get notified when there are problems. By problems, I mean specifically when you have what we call in support fires, which are not literal fires. Obviously, there are much more serious literal fires out there. But when the site is down, or when there's a major product issue, so if we made an update to a particular product and broke it fundamentally, how would we communicate to our internal teams that there was a problem, or how would we be communicated to as well? Again, once you get to larger sizes, you can think about putting on-call rotas and fire marshals and sort of more specific role types around that, clearer responsibilities. But at the moment, just having to think of like, okay, well, if there's something major that is wrong, how do we find out? How is someone going to tell our support team that something major is wrong, so that we don't look foolish, and so that we're able to communicate with customers, and also importantly, so you can sort of aggregate all the conversations that are around that, create a saved response, get back to them really quickly to tell them, yeah, we're aware of it, we're working on it, we've got an ETA, we don't have an ETA, but we're already investigating, and then reply to them all to let them know when it's done. Whether you're using like the GitHub to Intercom kind of integration, and then you close the issue in GitHub and it reopens all the chats in Intercom, or whether you have something else, how is that going to work? Or on the flip side, if you suddenly start to see 6 people mention the same thing is broken at the exact same time, how does your team escalate that to someone who can start working on it? Are they using PagerDuty, for example, to wake someone up when it's the middle of the night because they broke it? Or maybe they didn't broke it, but then they can go and wake up the person who broke it. What are your processes for that kind of thing? That's it's interesting. A lot of that does come down to, how much has that happened to you recently? Have you been burned by these fires recently? And is that something that needs to change? If not, that's great. Well done. Maybe you have all your stuff together. That's very impressive. But it can take a lot of the pressure off, I have to say.
Oh, definitely. We, as I mentioned earlier, we're building our own platform and really starting to build things out ourselves. And with ownership over your own technology, that also means ownership over your own incidents and problems in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So over the past 2 months, we've really been focusing on our incident management processes and how we actually go about these fire drills and solving them. And when these things happen, how do we deal with it? And I will say, if you are thinking about that and you haven't run a fire drill of a test incident or going through it with your team in a safe environment, definitely recommend doing that, because the more they can get hands-on with it, the more they can practice with it, the smoother it will go when you actually do have to deal with that live. So really thinking about these processes can make it much more effective in the long run.
That's a great point. Yeah, we never did fire drills. We just had plenty of fires.
Hey, practice makes perfect, but throw them in the deep end, make them do it.
Exactly. So that's the first topic, which was operations. Anything else to add from your perspective, Neil?
Not specifically. I think what you mentioned before, like typically, I think as support leaders, we generally try to have a pulse on it, especially in smaller organizations and teams. When you do actually go through some of those processes, you kind of know what's going on and where those friction points are. So if any of those do come up, then yeah, I would say focus there.
Cool. Cool. All
But
right.
when it
Well,
comes to oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you segue.
I was gonna say, when it comes to a lot of those operational pieces and helping your team spend the most effective time, self-service and proactive support can be a really good way to solve that.
Well, you're
Any
absolutely right. Well, the best way to have fewer conversations with customers when they don't need to is to help them help themselves. Yeah. So I think the general questions here are like, do you have a comprehensive help site? Like that sounds obvious, but you would be maybe not too surprised at the times where you go to use a product and wow, there's not much there. But do you have a help site that works? That works, is it effective on mobile? Is it effective on the web app? Is it up to date? Is it really up to date, though, Neil? That's the real question. Your screenshots, are they up to date? Your walkthroughs, your steps, your videos, are they actually were up to date? And are they integrated into your change management processes? If there is a product change, how are customers finding out about it? Is it a product marketing team? Probably a lot of the people listening to this are not in organizations that have like a dedicated product marketing team. Certainly at Expensify, we were keen on doing as few fragmented teams as possible. And so our team, the team that I was on, we owned all those documentation changes. And I personally loved it because we were the people talking to customers every day. And so we knew how they talked about things. We knew how we wanted to communicate things better as well. So how do you when you're able to do that proactive education for customers, you can tell them in advance what the changes are. You can, if you have an account management team, if you have people who are customer success, depending on the words you're using to describe mostly similar things, then they can reach out to high value customers and notify them of changes as well, get early feedback from them too. But you can also do things like running webinars to educate customers. Are they once off? Are they on demand? Or are they repeated? There's some interesting looking products. I haven't used them yet, but interesting looking products where you can record a webinar once and then rerun it multiple times on demand so that people can watch those and feel like they're involved in them and get a better idea there, but without you having to do it 10 times a week or 20 times a week. So those are some ideas in terms of self-service and proactive messaging. Obviously, then with the surge in AI, there's a lot of interest about AI and AI chatbots. There's a lot of I would say I'm probably on the slightly more skeptical side of AI chatbots in particular. I think I've got a lot of time for AI in other cases and AI in other products, but my personal experience and what I've seen from a lot of the chatbots is that it's not been very good. So if you are using an AI chatbot, is it actually any good, and how are you getting really confident in that? Is there always an escape hatch to get through to your team, to get through to an actual person? If there isn't, then trust me, it's incredibly frustrating, and you'll end up just not having customers solve their problems because they can't actually rephrase it in a perfect way to get the right response that a human probably easily understands. Are you reviewing the responses that are getting sent? Again, just like the quality for that we were talking about in the first section with operations, the quality of an AI chatbot is important to review as well, and make sure that you're sampling them at probably at a higher rate, given that they're probably going to be doing a large volume of your interactions. And then how are you identifying and preventing hallucinations, which I didn't think that we'd talk this much about hallucinations a couple of years ago. Like that was my sort of weekend conversations, but now that hallucinations have become a weekday conversation for some reason, it seems important to talk about and identify those, and really think like, okay, where's the source of information, and how can you make it so that they're very confident in the information, and that you're confident in the information it's providing as well. Any self-service and proactive thoughts from you as well, Neil? There's a lot there.
Yeah, I definitely think that keeping it really up to date is
Mm.
one of the things that people can let knowledge debt go for quite some time, and
Yeah.
then really they see it it outgrows you in a bit, and making sure that you're actually keeping it audited and up to date is really, really important. How you do that change management. I ran into one of those yesterday where there was no escape hatch for the AI conversation.
So annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And I hope the person who is reviewing it sees it, because I left some feedback about it, hopefully in a nice way. But yeah, like giving that out. And then once I gave it that feedback, then it gave me the out. Oh, hey, you want to talk to a person? Yeah,
There you
yes, that's
go.
what I
That's
said.
just yeah, and that's ridiculous that you have to go to that extent and put that work in. Like there's
Yeah.
yeah, I
That's a
think
whole nother conversation.
I know, yeah, and yeah, you're right. Let's not get into the fundamental mistrust and the fundamental devaluing of customer support. That's fine.
What I would say is, like, if you are looking at self-service and proactive things that you can do or implement, and if there are operational things that you're looking at, if you are seeing what your team is spending their time on from an operational perspective, then you can also see those things that you don't necessarily get a lot of, that your team handles really quickly. And that's probably a good opportunity as well for either clarity in self-service, like is it actually clearly presented on the website at the beginning of the journey, or in the tool itself? Is there options for that information, rather than only looking at your help center itself? Partner with product teams to see if you can raise some of that information or clarity. It could be a good opportunity for that.
Yes, I entirely agree. Just because they're nice, quick tickets, nice, quick chats to handle, doesn't mean you should keep them. Like that's probably not the best focus of your time. And just thinking about like, oh, we can automate that through a chatbot is a bit like, okay, well, we're still we're still going in the wrong direction there. Let's have customers not need to ask the questions at all. Like,
Yeah,
let's respect their time first and foremost.
yeah, definitely, 100%. And
Yeah.
I think now we're going into the most interesting and most complex bits in that sense, which is one, really, how do we help teams, and
Mhm.
how do we work across teams and really service business needs? Is there one in particular you want to jump in and talk about?
Let's do people needs first. I know. Yeah, it is the most intriguing, and as managers, as leaders, the one that we probably end up spending most of our time on, because we are all complex beings with our own aspirations and challenges, both inside work and outside work. So I guess the general question to start off with is like, well, how's your team doing? You know, are people particularly burned out? Are people struggling? Are people thriving as well? So what I like to think about as well is this rock star and superstar dynamic, where at periods of time, people will be rock stars where they are rock solid, where they are reliably showing their working, they're reliably showing up, and they're reliably contributing in that sort of stable kind of growth trajectory where they are now. Maybe they have other priorities. Maybe they are tired parents and they're just like, okay, right now I don't need to grow 150% at work every single year, and that's just not where I am in my life. But they're still great contributors and great teammates. Just because they're not having on that rapid growth trajectory, don't forget about them and don't underestimate them. They will be the majority of your team most of the time, so you should be working with them to remove blockers from their work as well. So who's in that kind of track versus who is on that superstar track. So maybe they've got a period of rapid growth. Maybe they have a lot more time. Like I'm thinking of myself in 10 years where I am. I don't know why. Actually, both of my children will be like early to mid-teens at that point, so maybe I will now have more energy in a workspace. But let's say in 20 years, I'll be back on the superstars track. But that's when you have rapid levels of growth, rapid levels of change. You can take on more responsibility. So who's in that kind of bucket? Who wants to grow in that way? What challenges can you put in front of them? Where can they take on more responsibility? What can you do to support them there? Who do you like? What are your hiring needs? Do you need to hire again? Are there skills that you're missing at the moment that you didn't hire for before that you now need to think about hiring for? Are there things that have changed so now you don't need to hire as much? Are there things that have changed that your skill set is fundamentally different now, where maybe it's a lot more about because you've put a huge amount of investment into proactive and self-service models and all that sort of jazz. Suddenly you need much more complicated problem solvers, people who are thinking more from a business perspective than just from a product perspective, for example. But talk to me, Neil. Like this is you as well. This is you and your day to day.
I mean, I think a lot of it people need specifically as well, like what you mentioned. There are going to be your rock stars who are super consistent, and I think consistency is also key in that sense, because if you are looking to really deliver and you're looking to be able to bring those things up, then being able to create consistency and a rhythm within people as well is really important. I mean, if people know what to expect when they come in and they know how to do the job well, that's also something to recognize and celebrate in that sense, rather than just people who are just, okay, on to the next thing, okay, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. It's great and wonderful that they're growing, and you want to facilitate that as much as possible for these people who are on the superstar track. But at the same time, do you have succession planning in place for those people who are growing? Do you have, if you're going to give them more opportunities and they're going to grow into something else, do you have people who are going to fill that need or fill that gap in that sense? When we were talking about self-service and operations as well, there are a lot of things that you want to implement maybe, or be able to work on solving needs for. Do you have somebody who has capabilities for that? And what I like to try and do is think about, if there is an opportunity for somebody to feel really connected and be able to grow in that larger picture, is an opportunity, or is there capacity for them to be able to jump onto those and participate in that project? So I like to think also about, that hiring plan in a sense of, okay, we have enough to keep the gears turning and keep the lights on,
Mm-hmm.
but making sure that we also have room for people to be able to spend time out of the queue, developing in areas as well. I think is one of the important things as well, because if you don't really focus on giving people the opportunity, then they're just going to continue to do the same thing all the time, and then they're not growing, and maybe they go from rock star to just coasting, and that's not a place that people really want to be unless you want to be there, and then that's their choice. So really understanding your people's needs in that sense is really, really important. In your list, you said, how can we stop doing something that people hate doing,
Yes.
and they really, really don't like? And I will mention, I had an activity that I did with my team. We have a team day every quarter where we take a space out of the queue. We just come together as a team to really be able to focus on that kind of helicopter and overview. And for our main session workshop that we did this kind of pain scale activity, like in a doctor's office, how much pain are you feeling? Are you feeling really nice and good, or is it like a 10 super intense? And what we did is we had everybody, just before they knew that the scale was there, just brain dump all of their activities. What's
Great.
everything that you do when you come into work? We want to know the nitty gritty, all the tasks. Maybe your team doesn't know that you're doing tasks that you're actually doing. So raising visibility of the things that you're doing is really important as well. And once they gone and dumped everything that they like to do. I loved it because people also put like get a coffee, talk to colleagues, like these things as well,
Yeah.
which I thought was great.
Hopefully no other teams saw that.
Yeah, right. And then they went in, and then we showed them the scale, and we said, okay, now put all of those tasks on how much, kind of what's the quote unquote pain that it gives you. In that sense, is it unbearable? Is it something that you really, really, really hate doing? And it's nice and interesting to see how that balance or where you land as a team on the scale across all of those tasks. And then what are some of those really painful things that you can alleviate from your team and try and focus on? This is where we're going to focus our efforts to try and get some wins this quarter or year.
That's great.
So it was an interesting activity.
That sounds like a really helpful activity for people to maybe replicate. How would they see more about that?
I wrote an entire activity blog article on how to do it, and then
What? You should link to that in the show notes.
I accidentally deleted it.
What? Did you?
Yeah, I have to rewrite the whole thing. So I'll do it and I'll link it. It'll be there.
You're kidding. No, it's still here. I'm looking at it.
On LinkedIn it's there, but I wrote a whole thing on how to do it. But
okay,
yeah.
well, I would say link to the LinkedIn post in the show notes.
Yeah, they'll see. It's a nice visual that's there as well. You can see how it can really help your team. But in terms of hiring plan, onboarding, and all those other things, I think those are definitely things you can also look at for people needs.
Absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Cool. But that's internal within your team. Like, I think so moving on to the next point then, working across teams, we've briefly touched on this, but like you should be working out how you are interacting with other teams, and which teams maybe you have the poor relationships with and which teams you need to improve your relationships with. And in particular, like the people who are making decisions, the people who have power in those teams, how are you getting them on board and how are you getting them on side with you? I think we've touched on it a little bit before, but things like product changes, where is the checkbox? Where is the actual process within a product management process that says, oh, here is when we notify someone on the support team, someone from customer success, customer experience. When exactly do we tell them that there is a product change happening, both to get their perspective on the problems that you're addressing and the solutions that you're putting in place, and also in terms of change management and communication and documentation updates and education internally as well.
Have you ever been in a position where your customers know something before you do?
Yeah, all the time now. Yes.
How is that for you?
It's never good. Sometimes I can't remember where I was writing about this recently. Oh yeah, no, actually this comes up in I'm speaking at Elevate CX London in November 2024, and this is a topic that I talk about as well, which is like when the product changes and you are the last person to know. Sometimes there are good reasons for that. Sometimes it's like, oh dear, there's a super urgent legal matter or security matter that we identified and had to roll out a fix for in an hour and a half. And I'm really sorry we weren't able to tell any other teams because we had to get it rushed out the door. But a lot of the time it's like, oh, we've been planning this for months. Did no one tell you? I'm sorry. And it's so frustrating. Or it's a change that was a little bit smaller, but it's just hard to see what the impact is going to be on customers unless you actually have that customer's perspective. And that was an expense. And Expensify had like pretty extensive product and project management processes, but it still requires someone to go and pay attention to it. And so we had ways of making that a requirement, but we also had ways where things could still slip through from time to time, and it was intensely frustrating. And usually sometimes it would be like, oh my god, okay, we need to roll that back because it just doesn't work, or it's fundamentally broken a relatively core process flow. So yes, it was frustrating.
It's so like these things happen, they do. But if they are happening, and I think that's one of the good things to look at is like how can you better build the relationships with those teams in order to get yourself in that process? How do you start getting those things up? Do you need to meet with cross-functional partners a little bit more? Maybe. I think myself now looking at a lot of things in our company and our teams, a lot of my time as a leader is actually just spent talking to those other departments and getting those
Mhm.
things and being a liaison for my teams as well, in that sense, to try and gather that information and bring it back in and digest it for them in a
Absolutely.
way as well. So think about building those relationships and how do you function.
Exactly. Slightly more tactically, I guess, then the one question to consider as well when you're thinking ahead to next year is like when your team gets a question about sales or marketing or security or hiring, like how are those actually consistently getting handed off to the right people in the right team, so that they don't just get dropped entirely, because that, like, from a customer's perspective, that's a terrible experience that you write into one place and then you get told, oh well, no, you need to email this email address. And it's like, well, why? You know, this is not some sort of magic walled garden thing. You can just assign it to someone from that team, or you can just do something to make sure that it gets passed across correctly. Like
uh,
this is not hard to do. So just
no,
consider,
I've
like,
had
what are the smooth ways of doing that?
Yeah, I've had some times where it's like, okay, well, I come to chat. I'm here. I need help with this thing, and they say, oh, well, this is sales. You need to go to support for this. I'm like, well, I'm from a customer perspective, like I'm just
Yeah.
reaching out to you as a company.
Yep.
It's not my responsibility as a customer to know which specific,
Hmm.
your chat bubble is your chat bubble. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I guess, and again, especially if you're one of those larger organizations, I as a customer don't care whether I'm talking to someone from customer support or customer success or customer experience or customer sales or renewal management or anything like that. All I want is to ask a question and to get a response, or ask for something and for that to happen or not happen. But yeah, you always want that to be smooth as well. Okay,
Yeah.
last big topic, which is one we've mentioned quite a few times, but that is the business needs and the overall business, which I think is pretty critical. Like, it's kind of why we're there. We're not just some small little part of the thing. We're there to meet the business goals as well.
And while I think this is one of the biggest topics in this list, I think it's also been one, an age-old conversation, but two, a big topic for 2024
Mm,
overall. One of the things I'm seeing a lot in just the industry conversations is this and how to do this better, in a sense of becoming a better business partner and really solving for those needs. So I would ask, how do you go about making sure that you are solving those business needs?
yeah. I think so. There's a couple of aspects to it. I think one aspect to it, the first thing to think about is like, how are you reporting on your state of support? So not less thinking through this kind of conversation of this, like, state of affairs for 2024, more on the, like, okay, here's how our support, our success interactions are going, and getting what is usually called voice of customer reporting going there. So if you're not doing that, it can be something that's quite useful to start to do, to get attention on problem areas that are occurring frequently. So basically, you're trying to tell as many people within your company as possible what customers are interacting about, what they're asking about, what the themes are, and what you see as the biggest opportunities for improvement, or maybe risks for improvement as well. So you can include information on churn in there as well. If you're not thinking about churn, then that's probably something that is really useful to think about, as well as the top churn reasons. And I think that can help to, it can also be a good place to talk through how you are contributing to the overall company strategy. And that's a good way to demonstrate that support is not a cost center, and it is a key to overall success. So in there, you can be talking about, net, if you're increasing revenue from existing customers, how are you doing that? Like, what are the steps that you're actually taking to improve the overall business's health and longevity, especially in, I'm most of my focus is really business to business recurring revenue kind of situations where you're doing software as a service. And so it's considerably easier to demonstrate from that perspective, is you have a customer and then you work with them more and they use your product more and they pay you more over time. Those are great things to demonstrate to the rest of your company, that, like, actually sales isn't the only one that makes money. Like, the overwhelming majority of your revenue will come from existing customers if you are in that sort of B2B SaaS space. So like you should be getting that sort of recognition, but also the resources that you need to maintain that and continue to grow that over time. And so demonstrating that through voice of customer reporting is really helpful. I would send it personally. I would send it out to the whole company via email. If you're not allowed to do that, that's fine. You could share it through Slack, or if for some reason you're using Microsoft Teams, you could use Microsoft Teams, and just start a conversation around it. You don't need to do big presentations, but consistently beating the drum on that on a, let's say, monthly basis, to say, hey, here's the state of affairs at the moment. It doesn't have to be extensive. I would say start with something relatively simple and then build on it over time. And once again, remove things that are not working for you, like things that are not actually helping to demonstrate the value that you're bringing there as well.
And yeah, I mean, for me, one of the things that we really focus on a lot is understanding what the audience actually wants and needs.
Hmm.
In our personal reporting, we used to report on volume all the time,
Yeah.
in that sense. But realistically, for us as a whole, there's only one real instance in which volume really comes into play, which would be around, hey, this product feature went out and this is how it affected volume.
Hmm.
Um, i.e., trying to build the business case for changing something in a product,
Yeah.
um, or but really understanding which audience you're talking to and then speaking that language. I was on your mention around B2B SaaS and recurring revenue. I in a different industry for e-commerce, for example, I was reading an article this last week which was saying, over they did an analysis of I think 6 million conversations or something like that, and they found that by making your refunds process quite very smooth and easy and simple and convenient, that those returning customers would actually spend 36% more on their
Mm.
next purchase than otherwise. And I mean, that goes to show your teams directly impact that
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And so I really think that reporting back on, if you're not already connecting into those larger picture things around the business sustainability, is a huge win
Yeah.
in terms of actually speaking their language as well.
Yes, because your team can engender trust with people in those sort of risky situations. Like if I think about it, even small things like our grocery shop, in the background, hopefully off camera, is a pile of groceries that got delivered this morning, and we ordered from this company, and they said that we spend quite a bit of money with them, and their refund process is incredibly simple, and it's close to a no questions asked kind of thing. And so we're comfortable with ordering things from them all the time, because if we make a mistake, they're just like, yes, that's fine, I will take it. Here, you'll get your refund automatically. And we don't have to do anything except for hand it back to the driver. And yeah, it's great. Like we trust them, and as a result, we use them all the time. And that, I think that's part of it. It's like building for the long haul, building products, building services that last, relies on building that trust with a customer, and relies on them trusting you. And that's how you can do it in the long time. Like that's what these relationships are about, is that long-term trust.
Yeah. And I think also on this point of really being able to solve the business problems and needs, I think one of those things is how often you actually go and see if those needs have changed.
Yeah.
I know that for me, sometimes I go to executive leadership and I'm just, hey, what are the biggest problems that you're trying to solve for right now? Just give me the
Mhm.
list. I'll take it from there. Just give me the list of all the biggest problems, and I'll see how my team can help.
Exactly.
And we'll
Yeah.
we'll go from there. And then if you are doing that, you're also building the relationships with them. Where if maybe you do need that investment or support in the future with something,
Yeah.
you've been able to have that quid pro quo of being able to actually help solve those challenges and needs.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So regularly meeting with people from other teams, executives, leaders, everyone else from those other teams is, I think, a really critical part of this as well. Okay, I said that we'd do one bonus thing, which is stop doing something, because we just landed on a lot on people's plates, maybe. So
We
I
did.
think the genuine theme of this one, last one, is like, what can you stop doing? Like you've just gone through this. If you've realized that you've got 16 social channels, as we talked about earlier, like, can you drop 3 of them? Can you drop all of them? What do you actually like? What are the 20% of things that are having minimal benefit on your customers and on your teams and on the rest of the business strategy that are no longer serving you and your customers? It's fine to have done stuff in the past that you're not going to keep doing. That is absolutely fine. How can you make 2025 the year of doing less, and bringing that, minimalism into your year next year, especially if it no longer meets the business's needs? Just, that's great. Stop doing it.
And sometimes less is more.
Always less is more. I feel like we spent the last year and a half in our house just like slowly getting rid of things, and at the end of it, there's no difference to my life. In fact, it's a lot better because now there's fewer things to fall over.
Nice. Keep it clean, keep it fresh. I think new year means also being able to start clean and start with a fresh perspective on all the things as well, and kind of reevaluate some of those. Listen,
Oof.
we went through a lot. We asked a lot of
I'm really
people.
glad that everyone was taking notes. I bet there's a lot of hand cramp out there if they were writing notes.
I did have to speed write, like really, we
They
went through
would.
a crash course of planning for 2025. I love
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. The good news
Don't
is, though,
worry.
yeah, if you didn't take notes, dear listener, you can go to customersuccess.cx/2025, and that is just 2025, and you can get the full checklist there.
Yeah, we took notes for you. Connor did a great job making sure the full list and everything was there. I think really being able to go through and audit a lot of the things that you're working on, take stock and see what are the things that you want to do moving forward is a really, really great way to do it. I think we'll for sure link everything, all the resources we talked about, so you can get your hands on some stuff, some activities, some checklists for yourself.
Yeah,
you can start kind of planning for those things as well.
absolutely. Can I, if I may be cheeky though, if
Go
someone,
for it.
maybe you're listening to this and you're like, oh, this sounds good, but I've just got so much on my hands. It's almost Halloween. I have to plan my costume. I have to make it really spooky looking outside. If you're in that kind of boat and you still want to do this work, but maybe someone else to do the work, you can get a little bit of help from me as well with one of my consulting services is the CX road mapping project, and so you can find out more about that at customersuccess.cx/roadmap. So there you go. That's my cheeky pitch.
I love it. But thank you so much, Connor, for putting all this together and being able to help people plan a little bit more structured and a little bit more, be more prepared for 2025 and share your experience there. I think it's super helpful and also very practical for people to apply right away, which is definitely something that I look for in conversations, something I can just take away and go do and go be the best in that sense. And it really, really helps, I think, save a lot of people a lot of time as well.
Here's hoping. This was a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you. I do have one last question, though. Same question I always ask at the very end of all of these episodes, because I love it so much. I love to understand what are the things that people have kind of shaped their careers and have shaped them to bring their perspective that they have. So my question to you would be, if there's one thing that you've carried over your professional life cycle in that sense, what is something that you've learned that you really still stick to today?
What is just one thing? God. Don't do stuff that doesn't actually matter. Like, I think in particular, when you got a big long to-do list, it's easy to do the things that seem quick and simple. But like, actually, you should always focus on the stuff that's probably the stuff that you're procrastinating on. You should probably do that first. Actually, maybe that's the lesson. Do the stuff that you're procrastinating on first, Connor. Please. Just the thing that you've been putting off. It's been in to-do list for like 6 months. Just do that thing. Do that thing now, because it's probably the stuff that actually has meaning and is the thing you're a little bit scared of. So just do the thing that you've been procrastinating on.
I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. And it sounds like you have one of those things
for 2025.
Eat the frog a bit. And sounds like you have one of those Todoist things to go look at.
I have several things on that list, Neil.
I love it. Well, maybe we'll see one of them soon.
Yeah, yeah.
I thank you again so much for joining me for the conversation and sharing your experience. It's been such a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Neil.